Hello, and welcome to today's online coaching seminar presented by Cross-Cultural Strategy and Design. I started Cross-Cultural Strategy and Design to help build and foster stronger working relations between the United States and China. I have personally witnessed how miscommunication caused business deals to go sour and how miscommunication has caused mistrust between two opposing parties. That is why I created this online coaching seminar on communication, because let's face it, you can't coordinate with another party if you can't communicate with that other party. Now, let's take a look at some communication patterns and techniques. The ideal situation for communication between two different parties is exhibited in the following slide. Notice a clear path of communication between client A and client B. It's almost perfect. The free flow and exchange of information and messages between client A and client B are not inhibited by any internal or external factors. However, in the real world, we know this is not possible. Here is a real-life scenario. In the real world, there will be variables that impede the flow of information between two different parties. Notice that the flow of information between client A and client B are blocked by a wall of external forces. Now, for the specific online seminar, what are those external forces that are preventing effective communication between client A and client B? For this seminar, we will call this wall of external forces a communication barrier. And for this particular seminar, we will assume that the two variables that erected this communication barrier between client A and client B are language and culture. However, we will delete the language variable. Why? Simple answer. Because we can't control the language variable. Language comprehension takes years to develop, and the local government's commitment to allocate resources to language development programs. Now, we understand that differences in language will erect communication barriers between client A and client B, but for this seminar, we will focus on the variable that people can have more control over. That variable is the cultural element and its effects on communication between client A and client B. There are many cultural elements that can affect communication patterns, but for this seminar we will focus on the differences between explicit and implicit communicators. Explicit means to be direct or clear, and implicit means the opposite, to be indirect or unclear. So what does this have to do with communication patterns and techniques? Let's first take a look at explicit communication techniques. In highly explicit communicating societies like the United States, it is the sender's responsibility, the speaker, to formulate clear and direct messages for the receiver, the listener. In simpler terms, explicit communicators send clear messages to the receivers. You might be asking yourself, well, yeah, of course, this is how everybody communicates, right? Well, no. Take a look at implicit communicating societies such as the Chinese. In implicit communicating societies, it is the responsibility of the receiver, the listener, to interpret the messages sent by the sender, or the speaker. That is why we call this form of communication implicit, because the sender is sending an implicit, or indirect, or unclear message to the receiver, and the receiver must interpret the implicit message being conveyed to them. So what happens when client A, an explicit communicator, tries to communicate with client B, an implicit communicator? We get miscommunication. Client A is speaking directly and sending an explicit message to client B, but client B is trying to figure out the intentions of the message, or in simpler terms, client B will overanalyze the message to find hidden messages within the message. As a result, you might find the following situation happen. Client A asks client B, "Did you have lunch today?" Client B will not respond because he is trying to understand the true meaning of the message. And client A is confused because he thought he asked a very direct question. This situation is very common when Americans communicate with the Chinese. Let's take a look at a real-life example. This story is about a conversation between an American production manager and a Chinese manager. The American production manager asked the Chinese manager, "Why is the production of product B not met its annual quota for the year?" The Chinese manager does not give a direct answer, but assures the American production manager that everything is functioning as planned. So the next day, the American production manager calls the Chinese manager to discuss the following situation. "Why did you reallocate finished goods from product A into product B to reach the annual production quota for product B?" Of course, the American production manager does not receive a direct answer, so he is forced to fly back to China to oversee operation. What were the reasons for the Chinese manager not meeting his annual quota? Mismanagement of limited resources. Why didn't the Chinese manager explain that to the American production manager? The answer to that question can be found in the following formula. To understand more about differences in communication techniques and patterns between American and Chinese society, or for additional services regarding how to eliminate cultural disconnect, please view the following services available at www.legacy.com.